Welcome back. In the earlier lectures, we learned to create delta table, and we also learned to load data into the delta table, and then we learned how to create delta format data set at an external location. In this lecture, we want to learn how to read delta tables. So let's get started. Let me go to my workspace in home directory. I have set up a notebook for you, reading delta table. As usual, connect the notebook with the cluster, run the cleanup script, and then run the setup script. We are setting some data set for being able to work with it. So basically I'm creating a delta table. Delta table is dev demodb.flight_time_tbl. So how do we read delta table in Spark using Spark SQL? No brainer, simple. Use Spark SQL, like select a star from the table name, and you can use or read the delta table. You already learned that. You have been doing it for a long time in Spark now, so that's simple. But how do we read delta table using data frame API? That's another approach for reading delta table. No brainer again. So we can start with the Spark and use the read and maybe tell the format, and format is delta. This is optional in Databricks because in Databricks default format is delta. So even if you don't tell format, this code will assume that you are trying to read a delta format data set. And since we want to read a table, so we use maybe table method, and in the table method we can give the table name. What is the table that we created? We created this table, so that's your delta table. Give the table name, and once you are able to read, it will return the data frame. Maybe you want to display it, so let's add a display, and you can read the delta table as usual using the data frame API. So both the methods are simple, easy, straightforward, but let's assume that somebody or some other team has shared a delta data set with you at an external location. Some other project has shared that, and you want to read that data in your Spark code. How do you read that? So again, there are two parts of it. First, you should create an external location and should have access to the external location, and then you can simply read a delta table or delta format data from the external location. So let's try to do that. We already learned how to create external location in an earlier lecture, so I'll simply copy that code. I'm not going to explain that once again. So here is the code for creating an external location. Data is assumed to be available at the external directory in this container in this storage account, and using this credential we have access to this location. So let's create a external location. External location name is external data. So we created external location. Now if you want to read it using data frame reader API, you can read it. How? You already know that, how to read data from a directory location using data frame reader. So let me write code for that. How do you do it? Spark dot read, and you can tell format, which is optional. If you don't tell the format, it is assumed to be delta, and once you tell the format, after that you can load it from the location. And what is the location? We know data is available at this location, so instead of using external location name, you can directly use the URL, paste that URL, and this will work. This will work because we already have an external location set up. If you don't have an external location set up, this is not going to work. But since we have already have an external location set up, we defined how to access this location using this credential. So Spark will be able to read it behind the scene. Unity catalog will provide access to this location using this credential. So once you load it, maybe you want to display it. So that's all. That's how you can read delta format data from a directory. So let's run it, and it works. But usually when we get data at an external location in a project, we would want to create an external table on that data. We have data which is delta format data at this location, but we want to create an external table on that. How to do that? How to create an external table? You already know that in Spark you can create an external table. Syntax is same. You have to use create table DDL with location, and as soon as you give location, Spark assumes that it is an external table. So let's do that. Create table. Maybe for safety you can use if not exist, and then give the table name. So let's create this external table in the dev catalog, in the demo DB database, and let's give a table name. Let's call it flight time ext TBL, external table, and then in the pair of parentheses you can define the schema for the external table. For example, FL underscore date column, which is of date type, and then you can define rest of the columns. Instead of typing it, I'll simply copy paste it to save some time. So this is how you create a create table DDL. But we know that this table that we are creating from the external location is a delta table. It's the data is coming as a delta format data. So we can use using delta command. So make sure the DDL knows it is a delta table. And then since we are creating an external table, so we must give the location. And what is the location? Location is the same external table URL, right? This is the location. This is where data is. And this location will work because we have created an external location for that. So let's paste the external location here and create the table. So external table is created. Maybe you can test it, selecting data from that table. So we can access that data as a table. And since it is an external table, we know in Spark, if you drop the external table, Spark will remove the metadata only. The external table metadata will be removed, but Spark will leave this location untouched. And that makes sense also because that's the external location. Data is shared by some other team. We want to read it, but we don't want to drop that data. We don't want to delete that data. So that's why we created external table. We are accessing it, and at the end we may want to drop this external table, which will drop the table metadata. Table external table will not exist, but data will remain as it is. So we'll leave the data at the original location where it was for other team to do whatever they want to do with that data. And that's all for this lecture. We will meet again in the next lecture, learn few new techniques or few new things to work with the delta format data or delta table. See you again. Keep learning and keep growing.